Hello and welcome back to the War of Ideas podcast. I'm going to be doing something a little different today, even more different than my last podcast. I am going to be talking about specifically one person, that is Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is a psychology professor at the University of Toronto, and he was born in Canada. He's recently gained a lot of online fame. He has his own YouTube channel where he posts interesting lectures, and he's been on a lot of very well-known podcasts. And before I really get into this, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I agree with 80% of the things he says, but there are always some things you disagree on with people. And for him, I feel like it's a bit worse in my disagreement with him than it is for some other people that I listen to. And he's just a very unique fellow with a unique point of view, and I wholeheartedly believe that he is saying the things he's saying to create a better tomorrow, to have less violence in the world, and to lead people on the right path, and to make the right choices. But I think he's wrong in some areas. Alrighty, time to get into this. I will be playing some clips of him from various different interviews. Hopefully I won't be putting him out of context. That's the last thing I want to do. So feel free to let me know if you think I am misrepresenting what he's trying to say when I play back his arguments and try and go at them piece by piece. Alright, let's begin.
But would you use alternate pronouns if a student asked you to?
I think I've made my position on that clear already.
Well, perhaps not to our audience at home who are just being introduced to this. Would you use alternate pronouns? And why not?
Because I don't believe that other people have the right to determine what language I use, especially when it's backed by punitive legislation. And when the words that are being required are the constructions, they're artificial constructions of people I regard as radical ideologues whose viewpoint I do not share.
So, mostly with this Peterson controversy, which is really just a small drama, a tempest in a teapot, he could just get over learning to program a few pronouns into his phone. By the way, I only have half a dozen or so that I actually use on an everyday basis, so it's not all that difficult.
Professor Peterson, Professor Peterson, I'm going to jump in because I think Professor Peterson wants to get in on that.
Yeah, well, kindness is the excuse that social justice warriors use when they want to exercise control over what other people think and say.
Alright. I agree with him on his final conclusion here. But when he says that it's people using kindness as an excuse to control what other people say, I think it's actually them trying to force other people to be kind. It's not that they're deviously plotting a way to make people use different pronouns for some evil reason, and that they're actually not trying to be nice. Anyway, let's keep it going. It's almost done here.
Fourth, our differences in values, I would say that the highest possible value is truth, and that one of the concomitants is that we need stringent protection for freedom of speech so that we can utter the truths that we see fit. And I think that that's a value that's much higher than kindness, for example. I mean, there's lots of situations in life where kindness in the immediate present is not the appropriate way to react at all. But so, for example, when you discipline children, you often hurt their feelings in the short term so that they can learn to behave properly in the medium to long term so that their lives go well. And so this automatic assumption that the people on the social justice warrior side of the equation are motivated only by kindness when they're also clearly motivated by power is something I find completely untenable.
That's kind of weird. They're motivated by power? I don't know about that. I really don't think so.
I don't think that Pete's solution to program my cell phone so that I can remember what names people need to be called is a reasonable solution at all. We're actually supposed to now use electronic devices to bolster our ability to speak freely
How do
in
you
case
remember
we
names,
offend
Jordan?
someone.
Anyway, I think that will be the first and last time I will be agreeing with Mr. Peterson in this discussion. But yeah, apart from the reasons why he thinks social justice warriors are trying to impose this on other people, I agree with everything he said. I just don't think he knows the true intentions of these people. Like, what do they get out of it by forcing you to be nice to other people, by forcing you to not offend other people? It's not like you're gonna lose any of your rights, besides annoyingly having to change your speech. And yes, that's kind of losing your rights, I guess. It could lead to it. That's why I agree with him in the first place. I should be able to call you whatever I want. I should be able to call anybody whatever I want. It's up to me if I want to be nice enough to respect their wishes. I don't have to. Most people do because they're respectful. And most people draw a line somewhere when it gets too ridiculous, and this is one of those times to draw that line. In the long run, whether you do or whether you don't use the correct gender pronouns that people want you to use, it really isn't a big deal, and it shouldn't be a big deal to either side. People who want to be called the correct pronoun and don't should not be freaking out over it. Deal with it. And people who don't want to call other people their respective pronouns should also just deal with it, whether they choose to follow it or not. If you want to be nice to them and do them a favor, you can do it. If you don't care, that's fine too. The summary of that could just be consisted of, this is not a big deal at all, because as long as neither side starts using violence, it doesn't matter. You can both exercise your free speech against one another, and that's the end of that.
And I think it's more characteristic often of the guys that I see at the events rather than the women. I mean, I'm not sure about that. I'm obviously speculating. But, you know, I have a reasonably good clinical intuition. And some of the guys I see at those events, I don't know what their story is, man. I don't know what they're up to. I guess what are they trying to do? Be allies of the women for their own nefarious purposes? I mean, that's what it looks like to me. You know,
well, there's certainly an issue with that. It's a common thread with men, that especially in the male feminist category, that they align themselves with these women as allies and as this, you know, they take this moral high ground and they're this person that's going to show, you know, other men how to do feminism and how to behave with women, and they're really just sort of, they're mining the situations for social points.
Yeah,
you know?
Well, for social and sexual points, my guess is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure.
There's something seriously creepy about it.
First off, I see their point here, and I mostly agree with it. But you can't just say every single man that sides with a feminist is actually just lying, and he actually thinks just like me instead, but he's doing it for nefarious purposes, for social and sexual points. He makes a little disclaimer there and says, you know, I don't know this for sure, but my cognitive intuition tells me, well, you should really hammer that point home. I guarantee you there's at least one man in the world who isn't doing it for social points, and they actually think that way. But I'd say a majority, over 50%, you're correct about. They probably do it for social points.
And we're in a war between these ideas. I mean, Marxism, we already know, was a tremendously powerful doctrine, and this is its newest manifestation.
What is the motivation behind the individuals that are at the heart of this movement?
By this movement, he means the social justice warrior movement. And I feel like I have a quick and simple answer that is also correct, that I will say before I play Peterson's response. And that is, all they are trying to do is to make it so that we should not offend as many people as we possibly can, and to be nice to others as long as it's within the confines of our abilities to do so. As long as I don't have to take any physical violence, then why not do it? If it makes one more person happy in the world and it doesn't matter to you, why not do it? You can argue that we might be going down a rabbit hole if you force speech onto other people, and that'll eventually turn into something terrible, but I would pump the brakes on that for now, because this is pretty much a joke in comparison to controlling others' speech. People are just trying to make a movement so that you can have other people feel included in human society, so they don't feel left out. I truly believe these people are just trying to be nice and trying to make other people feel welcome and trying to make an environment where other people can feel welcome. Let's see what Peterson has to say.
Well, I would say that the motivations are as complex as human motivations are in general.
They're as complex as human motivations are in general? I think they're just trying to be nice.
Solidified into a movement, right?
Well, I think the dangerous part of it is that it's almost like a scapegoat mentality. It's almost like psychoanalytic projection. That's another way of thinking about it. It's like, one of the things that I've come to learn, and one of the things I talk about a lot, is that the battle between good and evil, so to speak.
Good and evil, psychoanalytic projection. What are you going on about?
So I would say, with regards to this movement, this postmodern movement,
here we go.
The malevolent aspect of it, there's a couple of them. One, it's unbelievably authoritarian. I got a letter today from a university student in Italy. I don't know what university, but she'd been having kind of a flame war.
Do you think their goal is to be authoritarian? Or do you think their goal is to make trans people feel welcomed and not left out? Think about that for just a second. Just because it seems authoritarian, and it is, doesn't mean that's their intention. It doesn't mean they intend to control all speech. It's stupid what they're doing. I can agree with that. But they're just being nice, and also happen to be edging onto authoritarian. Which, if it gets any worse, then we can start having a conversation.
I think it's a hatred of clear intellect.
A hatred of clear intellect, how so? What do you mean by when you say clear intellect?
Well, you have a clear intellect, as far as I'm concerned. I think that's why you're so popular. It's because you pay attention and say what you see.
I think what he's trying to say here is, oh look, I think that person looks like a guy. I'm just going to call him a he. And if he happens to tell me that he'd like to be called she instead, then I don't care, because I have a clear intellect and I just call things as I see them. Let's listen to that again.
concerned, I think that's why you're so popular, is because you pay attention and say what you see. And you're not too concerned about doing anything other than that. I mean, of course.
You're not too concerned about doing anything other than that. It's not like noble. It's not noble to say what you think all the time. Some people like that, some people don't. What if it's okay to have a clear mind and recognize that somebody is a male or looks like a male with your clear intellect? So you call them a he, and then they say, sorry, I'd like to be called she from now on. Could you do that for me? You can say, okay, I'll do that from now on. I didn't know. And you can make somebody on this earth happy through almost no effort. Or you can say, no thanks, I have a clear intellect. I like to call people as I see them. I think you're just lying to yourself because you look like a man. So why should I call you she? What I'm trying to say is, it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong in this situation, because it's not a big deal. Just make somebody else happy instead of angry. It shouldn't make you angry that you have to call someone, because you don't have to. They're asking you. But most nice people will call you based on the name or the pronoun you prefer, because they don't care about being right or wrong in that situation. They want to make you feel better. And the world isn't going to end, and nothing bad will happen if you say something that's false to somebody. Alright, let's move on.
And you can sit down and do nothing if you want. You can do it. So, but you shouldn't, because it's horrible to do that. And people who do it know it. Like it's meaningless. It's a funny thing about meaninglessness. There's no such thing.
It's horrible to sit down and do nothing. As far as I'm aware, humans are basically apes. And all we're really hardwired to do is to eat and reproduce. That's it. We're lucky enough to have the intelligence to think about why we're here, and people can do whatever they want to do.
People say their lives are meaningless. That isn't what they mean. They mean I'm in pain and anxious all the time. That's what they mean. Those are meanings, man.
Once again, not true. It can be true for a lot of people, but it's not true for everybody, and not even close. Some people like sitting back and relaxing, even if they don't have a job, even if they aren't busy all day. Sure, you can understand people wanting to relax after a busy day, but it's also okay for people to want to relax 24/7. That's what our primitive mind is hardwired to do. Are you going to blame people for falling victim to their own unconscious desires? A lot of people feel the same way as Peterson. They don't feel like their life has any meaning if they don't do something besides eat, sleep, and have sex. But a lot of people don't care about that. They're fine with just living as carefree as possible. And that doesn't make them the scourge of the earth.
You don't get neutral. I'm just sitting around, I'm not feeling anything. It's like, no.
Right, no one gets that.
Sorry, that doesn't happen.
Right, so...
Yes, it does.
You say do nothing, that your life is meaningless if you're doing nothing. What do you mean by doing nothing?
Well, by not accepting any responsibility, by not lifting a great load, by not acting out the archetype of the hero. That's what people are. That's what men are.
Okay. Here we go. By not lifting any responsibility, you're telling those people that their lives are meaningless?
If they're anything, they're mythological heroes. If they're anything.
If men are anything, I like how he makes sure to pinpoint men, as if women are not supposed to be doing the same thing. Pretty sure he thinks women are on this earth, like their main purpose is to nurture their children, and the main purpose of men is to live out their dream as the archetypal hero.
Some path, whatever it be.
There's lots of paths. I mean, so look, there's an old medieval idea. This is the idea of the imitation of Christ. This is something that Jung elaborates on a lot. He believed, this is one of the things that he said, was that the proper goal of a Christian, roughly speaking, is to enact the meta pattern of Christ's life in their own, to make it their own story. And so what did he mean by that? Well, part of it is, see, one of the things that characterizes the mythological figure of Christ, let's say, is that he takes on the burden of mortality voluntarily. He accepts it as a precondition of existence. And we have to do that because otherwise we get resentful. Like, life is hard, make no mistake about it. People's lives are tragic. You know, if you pick a random person off the street and you ask them about their life, man, usually there's things that have happened there. You know, they just beggar the imagination. It's no wonder people are angry and resentful and bitter. But the way out of that is to accept it, to accept your mortality, and that helps you transcend it. That's partly what the crucifix symbol means, because it was accepted voluntarily. You have to accept your death voluntarily. That's part of the path of the hero.
Maybe that's part of the path of Christ, if he was immortal before. This has nothing to do with humans. The only thing we're hardwired to care about is passing on our DNA and being healthy enough to do so. There is no other meaning to life than that. The meaning of life is to give your life meaning. And who is he to say, in particular males, not females, have to live out the archetypal hero scenario to have any meaning in their life? I'm sure it makes people feel happy and adventurous, and it definitely makes them feel alive. If you go hike Mount Everest, is that an archetypal hero scenario? We're not warriors saving the world here from evil aliens. You can either pretend you're a hero and live out a fantasy, or just have fun and do what needs to be done while you're alive and live and love as much as possible.
Confuses because you're thrust into an early age into a very rigid system of education, and then of jobs, and then of career structure, where you're in this place, and most people don't feel like that's what they're supposed to be doing.
Of course they don't.
And we feel very alienated by the very structure of society that we are embedded in.
Of course. Well,
people can do whatever they want to do. If they don't want to take on as much responsibility as someone else, it doesn't mean that their life is more meaningless than yours, because meaning is subjective. You can't tell other people how meaningful their life is.
You know, that's one of the things I tried to think through is why you should tell the truth. So it's not self-evident, man. A smart kid, the smarter the kid, the earlier they learn to lie. Lying is very powerful because you can manipulate the world with your language. And then you can get what you want lots of times, or escape from things that you don't want. So why not lie all the time? Well, I think the reason is, there's a bunch of reasons, but one of them is that you can't trust yourself if you lie.
Can't trust yourself if you lie? What?
And there's going to be times in your life where you have no one to turn to except you. And so if you've stuffed yourself full of lies, then you're going to be in a crisis one day and you're going to have to make a decision and you're going to decide wrong and you're going to be in real trouble.
That is just blatantly not true. I don't know where he's getting this from. Most of the things I disagree with him on are very nuanced, but this is just ridiculous. If you are mischievously clever and you try to get yourself ahead or try to not make other people feel bad by lying, whether you think that lying is a good or bad thing, it doesn't matter. His statement's still false. He just said, the smarter the kid, the earlier you start lying.
Because you won't have the clarity of mind necessary to make the proper judgment.
If you stuff yourself full of lies, you can't have the clarity of mind to make proper judgment. So if the kid is smart for lying a lot, how would you not have the clarity of mind to make proper judgment? Having the clarity of mind to make proper judgment has nothing to do with how often you lie, but how intelligent you are. That's what gives you good judgment. Telling the truth all the time doesn't make you have better judgment. It has absolutely nothing to do with it.
Because you've filled your imagination and your perception with rubbish. So, and if you really think that through, you see...
You filled your imagination and perception with rubbish. No, you're not filling your imagination with rubbish. You're filling other people's imagination with it. When you lie to them, you still know the truth on the inside.
People do seem to construct these pitfalls for themselves. I mean, self-sabotage is one of the most common things that you find in people that are struggling. I mean, you would think that someone who is struggling, the last thing they'd want to do is help themselves towards their own demise. But it's super common.
Yeah, well, I thought about that too. And so you tell me what you think about this. As if you talk to people, they say, well, I want to have a meaningful life. Generally, people want that. But then you think, well, then why aren't you? And then you think, well, what does it mean to have a meaningful life exactly? And then you think, well, maybe it means that you have to take on responsibility because your sacrifices have to be worth something, right? It has to have some meat, what you're aiming at.
Whoever said you needed to sacrifice something to have a meaningful life? What did Donald Trump sacrifice in his life? You could say his life's pretty meaningful. I'm sure Peterson would say that.
Most of my audience is men, and that their eyes light up when they're...
Yes.
So we were talking about the necessity of taking on the burden of a responsibility.
Okay, right.
Because people, not only should we be acting out the archetype of the hero.
We should be?
But we should be carrying a weight while we're doing it. Because we're like pack animals. We're not happy without a weight.
Maybe you're not happy. You know, every other animal on Earth that can't carry responsibility other than finding food? What about them? Are you saying that they're all unhappy because they're not playing the archetypal hero in their life?
Well, that's the other thing that people, when they find out how little the rest of the world lives on, they find out that the top 1% of the world makes about $34,000 US.
Yeah, well, it depends on... I know if you're, for many people, someone who's rich is someone who has more money than them.
Right.
Right? Which
Right.
is one of the things I really find funny about the radical left protests on the campus. It's like, down with the 1%. It's like, hey, sunshine, you're part of the 1%.
Yeah.
You're actually a baby 1/10 of 1%er, or maybe 1/100th of 1%er. You're just angry because you're not there yet. But you will be when you're 40. And you know it, and so does everybody else. And now, instead of regarding yourself properly as a fledgling member of the elite, you want to have it both ways. You want to be fledgling member of the elite and champion of the underprivileged. So how narcissistic can you get?
Alright, a lot of people use this point. Like, oh, what about the starving kids in Africa? You shouldn't be complaining about your living conditions. You're American. At least you have a house. And it's a terrible argument. Yes, because I have more money than starving kids in Africa, that means I should not care about the billionaires who sit on their asses and make money while they sleep. Because I don't have it as bad as some people in Africa, I shouldn't complain when I see a problem in my own country and I want to make it better. I should just wait until every other country in the world catches up to how good I am before I try to improve myself. I don't think so. I shouldn't care about the USA's terrible wealth inequality problem because, I mean, hey, at least I won't starve to death like some people on Earth do every day. I'll stop fighting for what I think is right in my country because of the starving kids in Africa. Sorry about that. I'll let you guys do whatever you want as long as I'm not starving. I should wait until I have it as bad as the kids in Africa until I should complain, right? Just because other people in the world have it worse does not mean you shouldn't keep moving forward in a society that's good compared to the rest of the world. This argument is similar to when people pull out the Islam card on the right and they try to justify being against gay marriage in the United States. They say something like, why are you all having a pride parade and fighting for trans rights when there's radical Muslims who treat their women like property? You should worry about that first. We don't have time to think about gay marriage now. We have to stop Muslims from treating their women like property first. Oh, that's right, I forgot. Most of the Trump supporters and most conservatives are now anti-globalists, and they don't want to get involved in the rest of the world's affairs. So stop using the excuse of Islam's rule against women as a reason for why you don't support gay marriage or why we shouldn't worry about it yet. Can't have it both ways. You either want to interfere and make their lives better, or you don't.
But you will be when you're 40, and you know it, and so does everybody else. And now, instead of regarding yourself properly as a fledgling member of the elite, you want to have it both ways.
But you will be when you're 40? That's a big generalization. There's not a lot of people that are going to be in the top 1% in America's wealth when they're 40. Although I will give him, he's talking about these universities, and he's talking about the well-known universities like Yale and Princeton, the private ones that get a lot of press when there's protests and have a lot of liberal-leaning students. Yeah, a lot of those students who go to those hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition colleges are going to be in the 1%. But it's still not going to be a majority of them. It's the 1%. Also, I thought you at least had to be somewhat intelligent to be rich, or at least somewhat hardworking. But all you guys do is slam these kids who have rich parents and who are either intelligent enough or have enough of nepotism on their side to get into these institutions. Yet you can go and do a complete 360 5 seconds later and say, well, you know, you gotta be at least somewhat intelligent or motivated to become rich, right? That's the whole idea of how to get rich with capitalism. The smartest people or the hardest working people get to the top and they get the most money. Yet all you do is slam the presumably most intelligent college students in America. I assume you think they're stupid for thinking this way. And I also assume you think they don't work hard because you said it. Jordan Peterson said it. And they want all of the benefits without having to do anything. They want all of the benefits of having none of the benefits. So if they're not intelligent enough to think the way you do, and if they don't want to work hard to make their money, like a lot of people seem to bash millennials on, then how do these people become rich? Because trust me, a lot of them will become rich. Maybe not 1%, like I said, majority will not. But a lot of them will make over $100,000 a year. Simply, and I know this simply because they are at these institutions. They are at Yale. They are at Harvard. Their parents already make way more than $100,000 a year. So odds are they will too. So would you agree with me that it doesn't require determination or intelligence to do that? You can get there with those things, but it is certainly not required. So yeah, capitalism can seem a little bit flawed from that perspective. Don't bash these college kids and then turn around and say, well, you know, Donald Trump has to be intelligent because he's rich, so obviously he's smart. But those kids at Yale are going to be rich too. But they're not smart enough to see things the way you do, and they're too lazy and they're not competitive enough. They all have to get their own participation trophies. Once again, you cannot have it both ways. I mean, why do you think there's so many professors on the left? I mean, they're pretty rich, especially the ones who teach at Harvard and Yale. I mean, they're the ones that are advocating to give more of their money towards taxes to help poor people. I mean, why would they do that? Surely, as a conservative, you think that they earn their money. And if they earn their money, they must be either smart or have a lot of perseverance and determination, or a combination of intelligence and determination. So what makes them think that those people who are poor deserve their hard-earned money? Well, maybe it's because they're smart enough to realize that the world isn't fair. Maybe they're smart enough to realize that a lot of luck is involved. Maybe they're smart enough to realize that genetics are involved. That how your parents raise you and how rich your parents are matters. And it matters a lot. And who your parents are is not up to you. And where you were born is not up to you. And maybe they realize that 90% of people, given the same exact environment and upbringing as someone who's in the 1%, would be in the exact same situation. Oh no, but not me. I had to work really hard for where I am. I need some form of confirmation that my life actually matters. So this big pile of money I made is that confirmation. And if you're telling me that anybody else could have done this in my shoes, then I may as well have never lived at all. If you think like that, you should try to change your outlook on life. You want an excuse to tell yourself that you earned it and that you are somehow better than everyone else because your pile of money is bigger than theirs. You're not happy with just more money. You want that more money to mean something. You want it to mean superiority. Sorry, that's not how it works when the world isn't fair. Capitalism is not perfect when the world isn't fair. Deal with it and find another meaning in life besides being better than everyone else. Just enjoy yourself instead. Try that one out. You aren't a special individual because you decided to work hard and you made it. And your idea of making it is finding any way, by any means necessary, to make a lot of money. Which, by the way, is not everybody else's definition of success and of making it. So some people who are smarter than you and persevere at their goals more than you do and deserve it more than you ever will don't use their talents and their work ethic to get a ton of money. They do it for other things. And going back to the professors here, how can you call these liberal professors stupid? Or how can you say that they're on the wrong side of the argument? If they're stupid enough to be a liberal, then how did they make all that money? How did they get a master's degree or a PhD? Why are they in the top 1% if they're stupid enough to be a social justice warrior? Huh? How does that happen? I thought they earned their money.
I mean, I think there's always going to be some resistance, especially from people that don't feel like people always measure themselves against someone. If there's someone who's out there who's just, some genius in some form or another, there's always going to be people that measure themselves against that person and find themselves coming up short.
Yes.
And so they try to attack that individual, someone who has just catastrophic success in some sort of a way.
Yeah, well, I think that's
often.
another reason for people to be enemies of clear thought as well, because clear thought is a good pathway to success. And so if you can go after people who think clearly, it's another way of keeping the dominance hierarchy nice and flat for your delectation, let's say. So that's the enemy of competence element that I see as part of the social justice warrior movement.
Right. And the extreme lack of financial success and even creative success.
Well, and even the insistence that hierarchies are always based on power. It's like the hierarchy of neurosurgeons is not based on power. Or it is, obviously. Hierarchies are based to some degree on power.
Clear thought leads to success. What about the liberal professors at Yale and Harvard? You think they got there without being somebody that has clear thoughts? How'd they get there? Why do some of them have more accolades than you do? What about Warren Buffett? Why does he want to give away all his money? Why is he a liberal? Surely he must be extremely deserving of the billions of dollars he earned. Right? That's how this works. As a conservative, anyone who has millions of dollars or more, you must be either intelligent or earned it through hard work. Or both. There must be some reason you have money and the poor person doesn't. Or why doesn't Warren Buffett think so? Why does he want to pay more taxes?
So disturbing. It was so humiliating. I felt so humiliated for him because she was screaming, "This is our home. What the fuck are you doing? You're not making this safe."
And it's not her bloody home. The university's not a home.
Right.
It's not a safe space. It's not a secure space. None of that. And if that when a university isn't a home, that's not what it is. It's a place to be confronted by, I would say, often horrible ideas.
I'd say it's a place to learn facts about the world. That's about it. And it is supposed to be safe, at least physically.
You want to learn about history? You think that's going to be safe? Do you know what human history is like? It's an endless bloodbath with a certain amount of hopeful progress underlying it. It's a horror show. And great.
Did anyone complain about history class being too brutal? I don't think anybody's complaining about that.
A horror show. And great literature is like that. And biology is terrifying, and physics is terrifying, and you want to be safe. It's stay home with your mom, stay home with your dad. Don't come to university if you want to be safe. Because
don't even go outside.
No, why don't if you're
The people protesting at universities are protesting other people's ideas. They're not protesting the content in classes. Especially the classes that provide facts, which is almost all of them. And these people protest people like you at a university because they think your ideas are dangerous. They're wrong for not letting you speak. Most people can agree with that. But these people are not protesting their biology class or their history class. Why would you even bring that up? University is a lot less about open discussion of ideas and a lot more about learning and studying so you have the skills needed to get a job. That's its primary purpose. And yes, obviously, opinions should be allowed to be discussed there. We have no disagreement there.
If the university is going to make you safe, then it ceased to be a university. So one of the things I try to do in my class, I have this class.
What? Let's play that again.
No.
What?
If the university is going to make you safe, then it ceased to be a university.
Really? Maybe for you in one of your classes, in one of your lectures, where all you talk about is theory and things like the stuff you're talking about now, not actual facts. You're just comparing opinions and sharing yours with other people and trying to make the world a better place. And 99% of university is teach this, memorize it, understand it, take a test to prove it, get a job.
It's just like Hansel and Gretel's, the witch in the Hansel and Gretel story. Well, my house is made of gingerbread. Just come in here and everything will be fine. Well, she feeds you candy to fatten you up so she can eat you. That's the archetype of a modern university.
When did this start? When did the trigger warnings? When did the safe spaces? When did all...
I don't know when it started. I didn't go to one of the major private institutions where apparently this stuff is happening non-stop and people aren't just studying for their chemistry finals like I assume everyone is. And no, the universities don't want to eat you in the end. I get the metaphor. They might be fattening you up. I'll cede you that point. They're making people soft. They hope that the outside world isn't going to eat you either. It's not a guarantee you're going to be facing hardships that you've never encountered in university before. It's not a requirement for universities to treat you like you're in the military, to toughen you up. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but you see what I'm trying to get at. They don't want you in their gingerbread house to fatten you up and eat you. They just want you in the gingerbread house because it's nice in the gingerbread house. I mean, it's a professor's responsibility to teach you stuff. It's not their job to introduce you to ideas that you will hate. They introduce you to ideas in classes that aren't completely fact-based, yeah. But because they might not be introduced, but because you might agree with the professor, because most people in these hard-to-get private institutions are liberal and an echo chamber, that's somehow their fault for not showing you the opinion that they don't share. I mean, it's not their responsibility to show you the opinion that they don't have. If you encounter someone with a different opinion, that's when you encounter it, when you meet that person and they tell you. Not every classroom has a discussion about Christopher Columbus and whether he was a terrible person or whether he was a great person. Some do, and some don't, and that's fine.
All this emerge?
Well, it has its roots in the student radicalism of the 1960s, especially the far left radicalism. It really popped up in the 1990s, in the early 90s, when I was teaching in the U.S. at that point. And
which university?
I taught at Harvard from 93 to 98. And there was a fair push for political correctness, especially in the early part of the 90s. But it got pushed back down. and disappeared and went underground. It went underground is more accurate. And then it's just come back with a vengeance in the last 5 years. And I think it's partly because we have all these radical left political activist departments at the universities, women's studies being at the top of the list, that have done nothing for the last 30 years. It's even longer than that now. It's almost 40 years, 30 years, let's say, have done nothing but produce a never-ending stream of ideologically minded counter-civilization political activists. And that's all subsidized by tuition and by the public purse. And that's another thing we really got to ask ourselves.
Well, how did those classes come about? Why were those classes created instead of classes that teach the things that you would want to talk about? Because more people hold those opinions.
The meaning in your life is proportional to the responsibility that you take. And that's interesting, because that's way different than, well, here's some more rights, man. You know, that'll help you out.
No, it's that's powerful stuff.
Here's some more rights that'll help you out. He doesn't like that. He doesn't like more rights. He wants the world to go back to being more difficult for people so that they don't get overwhelmed by their boredom and they have something to do. It's just not the way forward. Life is too good for people now, so we have to go and create problems for ourselves. I mean, that is what he is saying. He wants people to take responsibility, to take a weight, so that they can be a hero and have something to fight for. Because you can't be a hero if there is no villain. We shouldn't care about having rights. That's not what we live for, having rights. Sure, I can agree with that to some extent. Rights are just the necessary foundation so that we can actually begin to live our lives to the fullest. Don't make a generalization that the more responsibility people take, the more fulfilling their life is going to feel. There is no set way or rule to live your life by.
All right, this is an interesting one because it links back to another interview that I did. David Horowitz mentioned that Trump could actually enforce a sort of fairness policy in place for public universities and make them balance out leftists with an equal amount of conservative professors. Do you view this basically as a solution because the leftist ideology is taking over our universities?
If he does not respond with, "That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard," then we have a problem here.
I mean, that part at least seems self-evident to me, that ideology has just taken root there. And they've done studies, right? It's something like 90% of the professors identify with the left.
Yeah, well, and in the humanities, it's more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a reason. It's not like they were brainwashed into doing it. There's a hive mind there for a reason. Because the same type of people that have the combination of intelligence and or money happen to hold those views.
I don't know if the universities can be salvaged in their present form. There's too many catastrophes besetting them simultaneously. Student debt load, administrative overhead, this cult-like behavior on the part of the humanities, which is the core of the universities, because if the humanities go, the universities go.
Mm-hmm. Really? I don't know about that. I don't know enough to refute that, but I majored in a science field, so literally every class I took was just, I get told a fact, I write it down in my notes, I try to memorize and understand the facts, and I try to pass a test about the facts. So this isn't my expertise.
And then this technological revolution that's making information much more freely available. Like, that's a lot of challenges. It's too many as far as I'm concerned. I suspect that.
Yeah, technology making information freely available. That's a terrible challenge. Can't people look at both sides of the coin there? If they can't find it at university, just open up Google and go search this video. Search for conservative positions about the campus protests.
The universities are going to radically alter in the next 10 years. Now, that's not much of a prediction because everything is going to radically alter in the next 10 years. But no, I don't think that you can enforce something like that, because what'll happen is it sounds simple to do that, but it's not. It's really, really, really complicated. Yeah. First of all, people would have to cooperate, and they won't. So, just because you make an adjustment at the top doesn't mean that the wheels necessarily turn in the direction you're trying to make them turn.
Right, and it would also be using identity politics to solve identity politics if you said, well, we have to have 50% conservative thinkers, even though
Yeah, even Dave Rubin has to bring that up. He's like, that should be the first thing you should have said. That's what he wants to say. Like, yeah, this is stupid to force conservative people into professor positions so that they can infect the minds of their students just as much as the liberal ones do. Who cares if the liberal professor has better credentials to teach the class than the conservative one does? We gotta have affirmative action. Pretty sure conservatives would be against appointing someone to a position that they're worse at than someone else just because not their race or their gender, but their opinion is a minority in that setting. So yeah, Peterson doesn't even mention this. Rubin has to do it for him.
I would prefer more of a diversity of thought. You'd be using their logic.
Well, right, and how do you measure, and how conservative is conservative enough? And no, it's not tenable.
Okay.
Should have said that to begin with. I do agree that there are problematic professors that, if you're teaching a physics class, you shouldn't be going on tangents about how terrible Donald Trump is. You or a student might make a passing comment about what happened yesterday or a few hours ago in the world of politics because these things actually matter to everyone. But yes, do not berate the president just because you don't like him in a class that's about physics. You have to hear the same old thing from your uncle every time you see him Thanksgiving about how Obama turned his frog gay with chemicals, and you just push that under the rug and pretend he never said it. So you can do the same thing with your university professors. If they make sense to you, they'll change your mind. If they don't, they won't change your mind. You aren't being hypnotized. You aren't being brainwashed. It just so happens that a lot of professors and students who go to these well-known private universities are mostly liberal to begin with. The few students who hold conservative positions are not being hypnotized or being forced to vote for the liberal. And if they feel scared to voice their opinion because they're in the minority, well, sorry, that you shouldn't be. You should feel safe to voice your opinion without fear of being yelled at or getting bullied. If you have a good point to bring up that is a good counterargument to someone's liberal logic, you should be very eager to go after. You should be very eager to voice your opinion and try to change people's minds. And the one thing I couldn't agree more on with Peterson is we need to have the people who have those types of opinions in the minority be able to speak without fear, without retribution. The more people that respond to me on this podcast with constructive criticism, the happier I will be, because there is an exchange of ideas and people who hear both sides of the argument will get a better understanding of how these things should progress. All right, now on to the final section. Donald Trump. I'll preface this with Peterson does not talk about him that much. And I don't know if he likes him as president. I don't know if he supports him. Maybe he's scared to voice his opinion about him because of what so many people think. Or maybe he doesn't have a strong opinion one way or the other. But he was asked about it a couple times in these interviews, so I'll go over his answers.
What would you say Trump's IQ really is? Does 160 seem reasonable?
No.
This will be quoted in...
No, 160 is really, really high.
Yeah.
I mean, the typical... The smart person that you're likely to meet in your life has an IQ of around 145.
Yeah.
160 is getting pretty damn rare. And Trump's old, and IQ goes down with age, fluid IQ, although crystallized IQ either stays the same or goes up slightly. So he isn't the problem solver or the learner that he was when he was 20. No one is. If you're in good physical shape, that helps a lot. His IQ is clearly well above average. I don't know, and he's done complex things in his life, and a lot of them. And that indicates that there's something to him.
Really? He's done complex things in his life? To me, he seems like the most one-dimensional person I have ever seen in my entire life, who is above the age of 7. I want a lot of money, and I want my ego boosted as much as possible. That's all he cares about.
No, and he hasn't been successful just in one domain. He's been successful in multiple complex domains.
Multiple complex domains? Please, do explain. I don't think he ever does. And what about the unsuccessful domains, like Trump University and Trump Steaks, and Trump this and Trump that? What about the fact that if he just put the money he inherited from his dad into an index fund, he would have more money than he currently does now? What about that? And guess how much work you have to do when you invest money into an index fund or into any stocks? What's that? No work at all?
Each of which were quite difficult. It's very difficult to be a reality TV star that's successful, right? It's very difficult to...
Really? What about the Jersey Shore cast? What about Kim Kardashian? She really earned her money, right?
Work in the construction business, and especially on large projects. And I know he's had his economic ups.
Yeah, I'd say he funded those construction projects that have his name on them. Because he likes seeing his name in big letters, because it makes him feel important. I don't know about him being the architect of the project, or being the foreman of the project. I assume things went down like this. Hey, we plan on making a building. Could you fund it for us? We'll put your name up there. Or he asks them, I'll give you some money if you put my name up there. And they say, okay. And he gives them money and they put his name up there. Are you saying less than 50% of the population could do what he did with his money and his ego? Are you saying half the population isn't somehow intelligent enough to do that?
Ups and downs, but he stayed in the game for a long time. Very stressful. He's very stress resistant.
I'll give you that. He's stress resistant. Well, at least he makes it seem like it, and then he'll tweet about the people that said he did something bad, and he just has to get that word in because he lets it get to him a little bit. I don't think it really makes him furiously angry, but it definitely bothers him. But let's go back to what he said before that.
In the construction business, and especially on large projects. And I know he's had his economic ups and downs, but he stayed in the game for a long time.
He stayed in the game because he wants to stay in the game. A lot of people, I don't understand. Does that mean he's intelligent because he stayed in the game for a long time? Coming from a guy who stresses so much about the impact of taking responsibility in your life to become the hero archetype, that's really surprising to hear. Because if you paid any attention to what Trump is doing and what he says, he tries to take as little responsibility as he possibly can for anything, except for when it makes him look like he's intelligent. Oh, hey, I'm responsible for wanting to put solar panels on the wall. Look at me, that was my idea. I'm responsible for that. Oh, hey, don't look at me about the Russia collusion. That happened when Obama was president. I don't care about it now. It's already over. I'm president now, and I just admitted on Twitter that Russia interfered with the election, but I'm not gonna even say that I'm not gonna do anything about it. I'm just gonna blame Obama, which he's right about, don't get me wrong, and then do nothing, which is really something that he would do. Hey, it helped me, so I don't care if you broke laws and interfered in our election. You helped me out, so I'll do you a solid and I'll let you go on that one. Thanks, Putin, whether there was collusion or not.
To always think that your political opponent is just stupid, but he's done too many complex things for me to assume that he's somehow, if he wasn't smart, he couldn't have done those things.
Yeah, I'm glad you're acknowledging that, because when I see the people that are in hysteric mode and just saying he's this evil nutbag who doesn't know what he's doing and all this stuff, it just seems like such a lazy way of thinking about it. You don't have to like any of the things. You may not like the way he speaks or any of that, but the idea that somehow this is a dumb person, I think, is discounting of just the way humans have to work. This is interesting from Super Chat. Do you have
Well,
any...
he also won the presidency.
Right.
With a completely original campaign.
Ooh, original campaign.
For those who've abandoned hope, we'll restore hope and we'll welcome them into a great national crusade to make America great again.
Oops. And what's this about? Well, he can't be that stupid if he won the presidency. You know, eventually a dog has its day. You know, there's a lot of people who are more intelligent than him that have no chance at winning the presidency because they're not famous. Surely you can agree with that. And are you saying that he's famous because he's intelligent? Can you honestly say that every rich person in history has earned their money with either intelligence or perseverance or both? That the people that have a better combination of intelligence and perseverance will always have more money? Of course you can't tell me that. So is it possible that Donald Trump is a complete idiot, as rich as he is? Sure, it's possible.
And it's like, and without spending much money, it's like, okay, is he lucky? Because is that what you're saying? It's just lucky.
Right.
Well,
yeah, possibly. And because he's famous, and because WikiLeaks dumped the emails of his opponent, private emails that were never meant to get out, and because the average American voter is about as intelligent as the average American. So there's going to be a lot of stupid people voting, as well as smart people.
I don't think it was just luck. It was at least, maybe, well, it looked at least to some degree like courage. Maybe it was just blind, throwing caution to the wind. You know, I don't know if he ever expected that he could possibly win.
Yeah, I mean, he's never been a public servant in his entire life. His entire history of his life seems to go against every single inclination that he would want to be a public servant now. And most sane people would want a president who has experience in being a public servant, in being a politician, before they get to the most important public servant position. I wouldn't call it courage more than I would just a rich person getting his way because of his power and money. That's how he got into the running in the first place. That's why he was even let in on the stage in the Republican debates. And you could call it courage for what he says on stage in the debates, or what he says on stage in his presidential speeches, or you can just call it a guy that doesn't care about what he says. You ever play around with a little baby or a toddler when they're 2 or 3 years old? Maybe a nephew or a niece in the family, and you love enjoying the entertainment they give you, and maybe you play some songs and you tell them to dance, and you're cheering them on, and they go and show off their moves in front of the whole family. Would any of you do that at your age? Start dancing in front of the whole family? Maybe some of you, but a lot of us would be embarrassed if we didn't know how to dance. But the baby does it, even though he doesn't know how to dance yet, or she doesn't know how to dance yet. And everyone enjoys watching them because it's entertaining. Does that baby have courage? They don't know what embarrassment is. They don't know what courage is, because they're a little baby. I like to think of that as Trump. He's actually so socially inept. He is so living in his own reality that he doesn't realize how stupid everyone will think he is. He's a 2-year-old baby dancing in front of the American people. With one small difference. Babies have an excuse.
Yeah, and as I'm sure you'd argue, it probably had a little something to do with all those things, that maybe there was some courage, but that he also surrounded himself with people who maybe understood politics more than he did.
Well, he can also obviously read a crowd.
Yeah.
Because he was appealing to crowds. And that was partly because he did, I think, try to say what he thought. Now, you could criticize what he...
That's true. He appealed to crowds with populist rhetoric. A lot of the things he said in debates were Democratic positions. And he's once said that he realized healthcare is pretty complicated after becoming president. Who knew? Who knew healthcare could be so complicated? And recently tweeting, some of the fake news media likes to say that I am not totally engaged in healthcare. Wrong, I know the subject well and want victory for the United States. So he went from not even knowing it well enough to know that it was complicated to I know the subject well, and going back on his own words, although it was not in a debate or a speech, of saying that he wants single-payer health care.
He thought, and that's fine, but he also didn't prepare the same speech. He didn't prepare a speech and then deliver the same one everywhere, which I think is, I really find that rather reprehensible for people to do that.
Yeah.
Because they're parroting themselves, or someone else writes their speeches, which is something I can't even...
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see your point there. Him just winging it gives you a feeling like he's really not a robot like Hillary is, where her speeches are calculated and cold, and Donald Trump is speaking from the heart. I get that. But I'll be honest with you and say he's just too lazy to be calculated and cold. He's too lazy to read it and memorize it beforehand. He's too lazy to write a speech beforehand. He just utters his words and his base fans like it, so he's going to keep doing it. Even if it makes less sense than having a prepared speech. it's easier for him to do. Alright, here's one a lot of people seem to think is an epiphany and just amazing.
But that Donald Trump is our president now, the president who has had the biggest problem with the truth that we've ever experienced. We've never experienced a president like this where we know that he has a problem with the truth, and it's open. It doesn't seem to faze us.
He has an unstructured problem with the truth. He was preferred as a candidate to someone who had a structured approach to untruth.
Right.
Whoa. What a mind-boggling statement. It's just word salad. Hillary had a structured approach to untruth.
Preferred as a candidate to someone who had a structured approach to untruth.
Right.
Right? So it's like pick your type of lie.
Right.
You can pick the ideology, power-aiming lie.
Or
what does that mean? When did she lie? When did she lie on stage in debates? When did she lie about what she was doing or what she did in the past? You can bet Donald Trump made sure she couldn't get away with the things she did in her past, like voting for the Patriot Act or being against gay marriage. She was exposed for her flaws. She didn't lie to the public straight to their faces, to an entire population of people who have Google and all these websites like PolitiFact that analyze your every statement to see if it's true or not. She never maliciously, directly lied in a single thing she said in any of those debates. She might have stretched the truth, and that has a broad meaning, but the things she said always were based in truth. Always. And most politicians are like her, where they know if they get caught lying, they're screwed, so they don't lie so blatantly as he does. So what he's saying here makes no sense whatsoever. This man has a fake, photoshopped Time magazine cover of his own face on the walls of at least 5 of his golf clubs around the world as a monument to his greatness. Because having your name in those clubs every 5 steps you take isn't good enough. A fake Time magazine cover of himself. How painfully cringeworthy can you possibly be wide out in the open? You know how Peterson thinks that these social justice warriors are a danger to free speech? I have no idea how he can see that, but he can't see how Donald Trump is a danger to free speech. He's trying to create an alternate reality. If you told me that North Korea called him and said he looked like a stupid orange and that he actually had his finger on the nuke button, I would believe you. I would believe you. And if you think someone like him isn't a danger to our society, but you think people wanting you to use pronouns to make other people feel better is, then there's something very wrong with your thinking. I don't think you're doing it on purpose because you're secretly a shill for Trump or for the alt-right. No, I think Peterson's a genuine person who says the things he says because he means them, and that's what he truly thinks is going to be helpful for a better tomorrow. But I think he's wrong. Yes, social justice warriors are authoritarian, and it could spell trouble for the future because they're trying to control our pronouns, and who knows what that'll lead to in the future, if anything. But Donald Trump is the real danger. To say that Trump is highly above average intelligence, and to say that his lies are somehow equal to Hillary getting debate questions before a debate and voting for the Patriot Act is just ridiculous. Alright, that's it for me. If you enjoyed the podcast in this format where I talk about a specific person, although I couldn't help myself with Trump in these last couple clips, then let me know if you like this better than just me talking and no substance to bounce off of. I'll probably keep doing a little bit of both. Maybe think about getting some interviews soon. I mean, I will see what I can do. I'll see if anyone I know would like to be on, if they like talking about this sort of thing. I feel like a better conversation can be had when there's two people bouncing ideas off each other. And I will see you next time.